right now, an award-winning journalist. So great to spend time with us. And I've just heard that he will join us for the virtual meet and greet on Monday also.
Good.
So you can ask your questions directly to him if you want to talk politics at all. Yeah, he writes a column now on media and politics, but of course he's an award winner with the Murrow Awards and all of the Emmys and Peabodys, etc. He is the former senior correspondent at ABC News. Jim Avila, everybody. Hello, sir.
He looks like a picture of summer. Look at him.
We are in Baja today.
Wow.
We're in Baja, Mexico. Hey, buenos dias.
It actually worked and everything. I was afraid that you were going to be without a guest today, but it's working. So
it's
cross our
terrific.
Fingers.
Yeah, you sound better than you do when you're in your place.
Yeah.
Well, I'm at a 5-star restaurant that I'm about to go have lunch at.
Of course, you're a 5-star man, Jim Avila. I expect nothing different. Now, I want to ask you about a lot of stuff that went down this week, and I'm going to put the debate off for a second and talk about the news of the moment, which was, of course, the booking of Donald Trump yesterday. And if you can speak to the way it was, there's the booking picture. But if you can speak to the way it was done, and then so he lied on his. They kind of just do it. You can fill it out your own. It's an odd thing. They don't weigh you in. You just put your weight there. He had himself at 215, I guess. So yeah.
What I loved was all the pictures on the internet of people who actually weigh 215, like Muhammad Ali during his fight with Sonny Liston, 6'3", 215. Numerous NFL quarterbacks who were, in this great shape, and then you have the former president who is 215 or not.
So tell me, let me ask you, just because it was the booking, and I'm just curious what you think. Did you need to do that, or was that the theater of it all, where he goes in, he has the booking picture and the fingerprinting? I mean, that was a little bit of theater, in my judgment. What did you think?
Well, I think it allowed Donald Trump to capitalize on the theater of it and certainly make it theater. I mean, how many motorcycle cops do they really need to drive through Atlanta? There must have been 25, 26 of them. It's probably an even number. And head of the motorcade. There was no reason for that. Did we have to really see? Did we have to have the press van live following him in to the courthouse? Probably not. But I do think it was important that as much of this as possible is televised, so that there's no chance of the other side of the right wing claiming that this is just theater, that it is just fake. This is real. This is a real thing. He had to go into a real jail yesterday. This is a former president of the United States who is being, is a criminal, is an accused criminal, and is having to go through the same things into one of the worst jails in the country, where it's being described, the smell is being described as intolerable, and he was being forced to go inside those things. So certainly I think those things are necessary.
Just on that point, I mean, if there's a federal investigation into that jail, it's so, literally, inmates are dying from the conditions there, so...
like one guy died, and they found his body, he may have been bitten to death by lice. It's just an awful place. So maybe there'll be some good out of this. Maybe we'll call attention to this terrible place where the regular people have to go and stay.
The idea somehow that Trump capitalizes on this is something that you mentioned, and something else that is talked about a lot through all of these various indictments. He fundraises, and he seems to gain some power. Now, there's others, and you have made the point, I think, along the way that, hey, man, all of these indictments don't help you. After a while, they become baggage, and political baggage at that. And then there are parallels to, Adolf Hitler, who was in prison for a short time. And I mean, I don't, and then rose, of course, to the autocratic fascism that was the Third Reich. I see those parallels. I understand where they come from, but I think they begin to break down. But against that backdrop, Jim, can you calibrate for us exactly how all of this is affecting him politically?
Well, within his base, it's not affecting him at all. there's a new poll by Yahoo and somebody else, which does show him losing to Biden by 5 or 6 points now. So there may be some denigration of his popularity, but he still has a commanding lead. And there has been a few points lost in the Republican Party to DeSantis. And we have to see what the polling looks like after this debate. Should be interesting to see if anybody popped at all. But right now, it doesn't look like there's any at this point until he is convicted of a crime. And if that somehow happens before the primary and before the election, it certainly doesn't look. It doesn't look like before the convention. Like there'll be any other candidate besides Donald Trump in the Republican side. The cast that we saw yesterday was not, or Monday was not thrilling. There wasn't anybody who really went very strong, in my opinion. There's a lot of people getting ink, but I don't think that they're anywhere close to getting Donald Trump.
Yeah, I want to get to the debate now. In fact, we got a big shout out to Kathleen Bryant. Thank you so much for the 20, Kathleen.
Big shout out.
I want to ask you about the debate because I did think that you saw some of the extremism on parade. I'll invade Mexico was on day one and clean up the fentanyl crisis. That was something said by DeSantis. You heard Vivek very extreme on everything from Ukraine to it's hard for me to keep track of some of the extreme positions that Vivek had. I'll give you one of them, though, just because it's top of mind. The pardoning of Donald Trump, unapologetically carrying Trump's water. And then he said, and I made this point the other day, he was the greatest president in the 20th century. And then he didn't even check the fact that he's running against him. I made this point the other day. If you think he's so great, go, support him as opposed to running against. It was a weird, politics meets bizarre positions on major issues. Could you speak to the issue part of what they got to? Abortion, reproductive rights was in it?
Yeah, Vidak is supporting Donald Trump and is either running for vice president or there just in case there is a conviction and Trump goes away. He's trying to be the alternative. As far as issues are concerned, they continue to have a problem. Even the most moderate of them, who seem to be Haley, where she was at least moderate enough to say that there shouldn't be a federal law on abortion because there's not enough votes to pass one. So I'm not going to even talk about that. We'll leave it to the states. But the rest of them, the rest of them, including, especially, I guess, Pence, who continues to foster this fiction that Democrats support abortion up to birth, which is just not true, and it rarely happens. And it only happens, and when I say rarely, I mean single-digit times in this country every year, and it only happens when the mother is in danger, or when the baby is in danger, or there's some medical emergency. To claim that, as they continue to do as Republican talking points, that Democrats want abortion legal up to the time of birth is just not true. And nobody has advocated that. So on the abortion issue, that's a problem, and they have a problem with that until they abandon it. And I think that's what Haley is recognizing, is that until they abandon that extreme position, they are not going to win anything. It's not just they're going to lose the Republican, they're not going to lose the next presidential election. They're going to lose every election. And that's what's been happening.
That was even noted by Haley along the way. And Haley, as you say, comes across as the moderate in all of this. It's a weird thing in the Republican primaries, how you have to come out as more extreme than your opponent, it seems, to gain part of that constituency. And Haley seemed moderate compared to the other extremism on stage. But there was that weird show of hands moment where, DeSantis is looking around to see what the other, DeSantis is the leader, which is why maybe he gets a little attention on stage, but he's looking around to see, who else has raised their hand to pardoning Donald Trump. I mean, the question was asked, if he's convicted of the things he's been indicted for, would you as president pardon Donald Trump? And the hands went up, aside from Christie and
Asa
Hutchinson, right? And as I mentioned, and before the hand went up with Santos, he looked around to see who else had their hand up. It was a weird moment on stage, and I thought it spoke to that extremism that we're touching on.
Yeah, I mean, they all are trying to respect that MAGA core group that they don't want to insult directly. So they did take, what I did think was interesting is they did take an interesting position when it was asked whether or not Pence did the right thing. Almost all of them said that yes, he did, which I thought was a step in the right direction. Let's put it that way. So it wasn't just Christie and Hutchinson who were at that point alone in their criticism of Donald Trump. That was an oblique criticism of Donald Trump, and that's all that they will do at this point. The problem for DeSantis is that and they all are, but especially DeSantis, is waiting. They're waiting for the other shoe to drop on Trump. So they're waiting to see if he's knocked out of the race somehow, either by a conviction or by, finally the public sees enough and they start turning to somebody else. But they don't want to be alienating themselves from that group of voters, and so much that when he does do that, when he does drop out, if he does, that they have not alienated those people they need. So they're trying to straddle the fence here, and it's impossible. DeSantis got very little airtime, and certainly very little praise as being the debate winner. Vidal got most of the praise as being the debate winner, but I think that may have been only among the MAGA folks. I think in general, if for independents looking at that, if there were any looking at that debate, I think Haley was certainly the only one. If you're a born-again Christian right-wing nut job, then maybe Pence, who invoked God so many times that I thought he was in church. Those are the only two that really stood out. Christie, of course, continues to stand out with his criticism, but he's not getting any support whatsoever. And the rest of them, I could barely remember that they were there.
The debate format, as it's called a debate, we know we've talked about it before, it's a TV show, really. It favors people like Vivek, people who can speak well and confidently and don't know what the F they're talking about. I mean, Vivek is so shallow you could barely get your feet wet if you walk through his mind. And yet he speaks so confidently. And the favored situation is a format where you only have 60 seconds to speak because you only need to say something for 60 seconds. You need to show no depth. So say what you want in 30 to 60 second chunks. And he's okay with the back and forth. He's used to doing that, it would seem. And this pharma bro, all of a sudden, can seem like he knows what he's talking about. And the reality is he knows nothing about government.
Well, I think he was exposed pretty well by Haley during the Ukraine comments. She really jumped on him with both feet and did very well in knocking him back. And Pence as well, who said that we can fight for freedom in Ukraine and still be a world leader and still be working on whatever else they want to work on. In his case, it's the border. But at any rate, they, that was the case. Is that he was really jumped on and really exposed in his, as you say, lack of depth during that exchange, I think.
I lastly want to ask you what's happening in Russia. It's a bizarre story, and I don't know if it's made it down there south of the border, but essentially
we have
the head
newspapers.
The bizarre way in which this head of the Wagner army and Putin's foe, despite how he sort of lavishes praise on him over his corpse, Putin's foe goes down in this plane crash. And apparently there were two planes. I mean, this guy was not a guy who didn't take some precautions and didn't look over his shoulder. But Putin made sure that it would seem, I say Putin made sure. I mean, there's no, I think the evidence is just there in the way he was taken down. But I wonder if you could speak to Putin's increasing hold by essentially, this is tried and true, taking out his enemies, his political enemies.
Yeah, it's on brand. It certainly was no surprise to anyone when they found out that this guy who used to be his ally and his cook was shot down over or blown up. There was an explosion on board, according to
Right.
U.S. intelligence. So at first they thought there was a missile, and there was some video that made it look like there was a missile, but apparently that was not true. The U.S. government says there was no evidence that a missile was launched at that time, and they would know if a missile, our satellites would tell us that there was a missile that was launched. So it does appear as though there was some like a kind of explosion on board, and he was killed, and that's totally on brand. I mean, I'm surprised he wasn't poisoned somehow. That's usually been the way that Putin has taken care of his enemies or put them in prison forever. But the problem with putting him in prison is then he becomes a martyr, and he's already pretty popular in Russia. So I don't think he wanted to do that. He wanted to eliminate him, and he did. And it puts Putin back in a very strong position. It was interesting, and I don't know why this happened, that right after the death, the murder in the air, Putin rushed back from where he was to the Kremlin. He doesn't live in the Kremlin. So, he rushed back it appears, according to some people who are Russia watchers, to solidify his position again and to make sure that his allies understand what happened and what could happen to them if they cross him. He's a ruthless guy. And remember, one thing, why this is important to us, remember, this is the guy Donald Trump says is a genius. This is the guy Donald Trump emulates and wants to be. If Donald Trump could, he would eliminate all of his enemies in exactly the same way. We have to be careful of this. We have to watch this. Now, the big advantage we have with these right-wing nuts who are threatening violence is that they forget who has the planes and the tanks. They've got their AR-15s, but we have the government and the right side, I don't mean the politically right, correct side, has the big weapons. So go ahead and try it. Let's see what happens. That is, and that kind of violence thing is kind of fading. If you notice, there were about 15 people out in front of in front of the Atlanta jail yesterday, and it's gone downhill since. I think people, number one, they're afraid they're going to get arrested because it's been shown that they will be arrested and put in prison if they do something violent. That's a good thing. And two, I think they're losing interest in this. So I'm hoping that's the case.
Yeah, that's the other part of this. I don't think we're in general, a society and culture that is the kind of Civil War culture where there's going to be violence in the streets widespread. I do think you can have one-offs. I think you're going to, I think that really is the kind of culture we have. But you're certainly right about the weak nature of the kind of support in the streets, in and around the courthouses and venues where Donald Trump has sort of found himself. So,
Marjorie Taylor Greene showed up yesterday in front of the Atlanta jail, and they chased her out again, like they did in New York. They were, the other side was yelling at her and taunting her, and she had to run away. So, I know that I'm overly optimistic for your taste, but I do believe in the American people in general. So I think they've learned some lessons.
All right. Well,
ma'am, I'm on the phone.
Okay, we got it. Jim, we love you. And who said,
"Ma'am, I'm on the
phone"?
lovely Baja before we leave.
Oh
there
my gosh! Wow. Yeah.
Nice,
pretty great.
Yep.
Tell them to prepare if Ron DeSantis gets into office. There will be an invasion, apparently.
All right. Invasion.
There's never been anything like this.
The only thing that could have made this interview better is if Jim had a margarita in one hand. That's all.
True.
I was hoping. I was like, pick up a margarita, pick it up. No.
The restaurant hasn't
not
opened
open
yet,
yet.
he says. Yeah.
But I would.
All right. I love it.
Ma'am, I'm on the phone.
All right. How about it for Jim Avila, everybody? See you, Jim. And Jim's going to be Monday night with us, too. See you, Jim. Right on, my friend. Good. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.